Well, good morning, Hope Church. It's good to be with you this morning. I bring greetings from my wife, Rachel, and I have 4 children. And Carlton attempted to explain what my role is now, but officially my role is mission mobilizer and recruiter. I spent 10 years in Chad as a missionary with my family. That was during the time when Carlton and Nathan came in to visit with me. But now we are back in the States, and I serve in this role where basically I'm a go-between between our churches here in North America and our mission work in Chad. And I go back and forth to Chad regularly and check up on our missionaries and our various ministries. I can then report back to the church. I'm also a recruiter. And so if any of you are feeling a tug to say, hey, what about me, God? Could I be a missionary? I'm the guy to talk to. And I can help you process that question. We are looking for more people to go to this mission field. Having a missionary like Nathaniel and Carrie or Kay in Chad among the Bagirmi people is like essentially having one missionary for all of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Can you think about that? People who don't know the truth of the gospel. And for all that population, there is one missionary. So we're looking for more, yes. And we're looking for churches like yours to support that work. If we can get the slides up here, hopefully, I want to talk to you about what it means that you as a church have adopted the Bagirmi people. Hopefully that this is not a new terminology for you. You've heard about the Bagirmi people. You've heard about the fact that you as a church have adopted them. And so I'm going to talk about what that means this morning. I was really kind of happy. I was excited to see the clocks on the wall out there. One that had Spitzer Lake, Barnesville, and then Jamina. What's Jamina? Where is Jamina? Anybody know? Yeah, that's the capital of Chad, if you didn't know. And I talked to a young man who, upon hearing that that was the capital of Chad, was it one of you guys? Yeah, it was you. What's your name? John? Dylan, sorry. So Dylan found out that this was the capital of Chad, and I asked Dylan, well, what does that mean why would you have a clock like that in your church? And he said, well, it's because we have missionaries in Chad. Yep. And I asked, do you know their names? And he said, the Zivodis. Yep. Well done. Part of adopting the Bagirmi in Chad is being aware of what in the world we're doing in Chad. And I was encouraged to hear that Dylan knew about the Zivodis in Chad, and he probably knows a lot more than he let on. But what I want to do this morning is talk about what this adoption is all about. Do I have to turn this on? Oh, I found it. Yeah. There we go. So adoption involves a lot of different things. I mean, just like if you're adopting a child, it's a big commitment, right? And it involves a lot. Adopting a people group in Chad, like we're doing, what we're talking about, involves learning about them. It involves teamwork, perseverance, support. Obviously, it involves reward. And sometimes we need to look forward to the reward to get through some of this other stuff. So we're going to talk about some of that. What have we learned about the Bagirmi people? The Bagirmi are a tribe of people, predominantly in Chad. There's a few of them in the neighboring country of Nigeria, but for the most part, they're in Chad. There are people that are made up of about 130,000 people. They speak their own language. They have their own cultural identity. They're mostly farmers, subsistence farmers. Some of them fish. Some of them do trades. But for the most part, they're pretty poor, but they're very proudful people. They're proud of their heritage. They're proud of their history. They've been a people that has been able to really adapt well when the French colonialists came and all the different upheaval that Chad has had as a country. They still have their own king, which is very rare for a tribe in Chad. They have their own sultan. So we've learned some of these things. Perhaps that's new to you, but they're 99.9% Muslim. When Islam came into Africa, the Bagirmi readily embraced Islam. It's to the extent that if you are born a Bagirmi, to be Bagirmi is to be Muslim. And if you are not a Muslim, fellow Bagirmi would say that you're not Bagirmi. Okay? It's that much a part of their identity. So that factors into what we're doing here. The great majority of them have never heard a clear presentation of the gospel. Another thing about being Bagirmi is that you will live in a context where you will live and die, and everything will be about Islam because you have no contact with friends who can share the gospel with you because of the isolation that they live. There is no church among the Bagirmi that can share the gospel in the Bagirmi language. There are a handful of Bagirmi believers. And like I said, many other Bagirmi would say that they're not Bagirmi anymore. They believe that they're Bagirmi, and we're going to get to that. But if you were born into the Bagirmi culture, you would have virtually no access to the gospel. No Bible in your language, no friend that could tell you about the gospel, no church that you could go to hear the gospel, no radio program that you could hear the gospel in. Okay? So if not us, who? LBIM is currently the only mission organization that is intentionally investing in a long-term relational ministry among the 135,000 Bagirmi people. Well, that's like one Christian witness in all of Fargo-Moorhead. I mentioned Minneapolis Bagirmi, Minneapolis St. Paul. I was referring to all of our people groups in Chad that we're working with. Okay, so the Bagirmi have very limited access to the gospel, as I said. No Bible, no Jesus film, no Bagirmi church. So by investing in mission among them, we're allowing God to use us to be a much-needed light in and among one of the most spiritually dark places in the world. People have worked with the Bagirmi in the past. Our old missionaries, Don and Orpha Ron, had worked with the Bagirmi people. Virtually no visible fruit out of that, although they did a great work at translating some scriptures and getting the word out. And that was the start of this whole process and this whole calling. And we're starting to see how God is building on that heritage. But if it weren't for LBIM, they would remain a people totally unreached with the gospel. All right? Just a reminder of why we do this. Romans 10, 14, and 15. How then can they call on the one they've not believed in? So insert Bagirmi. How would the Bagirmi be able to call in the one who they have not believed in? How can they believe in the one of whom they've not heard? How can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can they preach unless they are sent? Verse 17, faith comes through hearing the message. We've all had the privilege of hearing the message by a friend, by our parents, by our pastor, by a Bible camp counselor, through the radio, and we have access to the gospel, but they don't. So how are they going to hear unless someone preaches to them? And how are they going to preach unless we send them? This is a picture of Nathaniel Zabodi speaking with Bagirmi men. Faith comes from hearing the message. The message is heard through the word about Christ. Okay, adoption involves teamwork. Who's on this team? Because you are part of a team that you're supporting and that you're very much an integral, vital part of. Who's on this team? Well, obviously, we've talked about the Zabodis a lot. The Zabodi family is part of this team. You can see Nathaniel and Carrie there with Selma and Cyril and Adeline and Talita. I don't know, most of you maybe know that Carrie is pregnant, and so they are expecting another child in mid-October-ish. I'll probably be in Chad during that time. So they are a growing family, and they have been an amazing part of this team. They've moved to Chad. They've learned the Bagirmi language. They've learned the culture. They've settled into Budamasa, a Bagirmi town, and they are making amazing inroads relationally with the people of Bagirmi, with the leadership of the town, and lots of opportunities to share the gospel. So that is very, very exciting. Amin and Talita. Amin and Talita are Chadians, and they are Chadians from the Lutheran Brethren Church in Chad. There is a Lutheran Brethren Church in Chad, primarily geographically located in the southwest corner of the country, where my parents were missionaries, where Don and Orpha were missionaries, where we have had a mission work presence there for 100 years. It was actually 100 years ago, this year, in 1918, that the Revenues first went to Africa as missionaries. And they settled ultimately in this part of southwestern Chad and started to work. And long story short, took a long time initially, but after about 10 years, the gospel really took root and the church exploded. And that church in Chad, which was not among Muslim peoples, it was among pagan animist peoples, has exploded and is now bigger than our North American church. And we are partnering with them. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but all that to say, Amin and Talita are from that heritage. He was actually raised in a Muslim family. He came to Christ as a teenager. He went to our seminary in Chad, trained as a pastor, served as a pastor for many years, felt a calling of God to be a missionary to Muslims. And we heard about that, and he went through a training program with Paul and Teresa Zabodi to be trained as a missionary, and he has now joined this team among the Bugirmi people. So they have now moved to Budamasa and are living next door to Nathaniel and Carrie, and they are working together for the sake of the gospel among the Bugirmi people. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is Amin baptizing a new believer who is coming from a Muslim context. This is Amin and Nathaniel, their families together. There's no church there, so they have house church together. And Nathaniel told me that they typically operate in at least 4 different languages in the context of their church service. So, quite interesting. All right, so keep them in your prayers. This is us building a house recently for Amin and his family to live in. Kay Ashley, we've heard about her. I think as we speak, she's probably in the air on her way from Casablanca to Chad. I don't know if you know the exact itinerary, Nathan, but I think that's right. So she is finally going to be setting foot in Chad. She has dreamed about this for a long time. As you know, she's prayed about it. This is a picture of Kay Ashley when I was with her in Chad a few years ago. She was processing this call. That trip confirmed in her, I think to a great extent, this calling. She was involved in the process of Hope, adopting the Bugirmi people. So from that get-go, she had that calling on her heart. And let me tell you, Kay is a delight to work with as basically her field leader. She does, maybe you know this, she likes to have her ducks in a row. And she likes to plan ahead. And she is so excited to know what will happen now in Chad and how it will happen. And I'm working with her to figure all that out and to prayerfully process that with her. But it's so fun to see her sense of excitement, her commitment, her resolve. This is not an easy thing for her to do, and it will be difficult. Now she's going to have to learn a new language, but she has such resolve. It's fun to see. So pray for Kay. She's part of your team. So I mentioned the EFLT, that stands for Église Fraternelle Luthérienne du Tchad. That's the Chadian Lutheran Brethren Church. This is the president of the Chadian Lutheran Brethren Church, David Gambusu. He actually spent a couple years at our seminary in Fergus Falls. This is Poulo Jacques. He's the director of missions for the Chadian Lutheran Brethren Church. These are some of the missionaries that we work with on in a close partnership. Amin, I already mentioned to you, is the tall one in the middle there. This is Niso Abel. He works with the Bronsons, who are also missionaries that we have among the Bulala people. This is Alona Jean. He's actually a missionary in training. Poulo Jacques is the director of missions, and then on the end is Malum Elwa. He's a missionary that worked with me closely among the Fulbe people, and he will be working with the Narvisons, who are another missionary family we have in Chad. So pray for them. They are very much a part of this mission. All right. This is my favorite slide of the whole morning. This is what it's about. These are, this is basically the first ever Bagirmi church gathering. Okay, this is in Nathaniel and Carrie's yard. Abaka, Ramadan, Isaac, Solomon, Fateh, Sukseh, Zainaba, Elizabeth, Amina, and Asan are Bagirmi believers. They're the only ones that we know of in Chad, out of that 135,000 people. And some of them are brand new believers, some of them have been secret believers for a while. Nathaniel and Carrie found them out and invited them to a gathering in their home from all over the country, most of them from Jamina, the capital. And while they were together, they spent 3 days together. They read through the Gospel of Mark in Bagirmi, the language of the Bagirmi people, in the language of Barma it's called, which Nathaniel had recently translated. So they read through that entire Gospel together. They composed 5 Bagirmi worship songs. There were really no Bagirmi worship songs prior to this. So they composed them so that they could sing them together in worship. They prayed together. They cast vision together about how they might continue to work together as a fledgling Bagirmi church to reach the Bagirmi people. They went and visited the elders and the chief of Budamasa, the town that they live in, which was a risky thing because they exposed themselves as Bagirmi believers to Bagirmi authority. And they prayed with and for the elders of the community. This is exciting stuff. This is what you're a part of, a brand new church among a people that have never had a church before. You'll be rubbing shoulders with them one day around God's throne. If you never have the privilege to go to Chad and worship with them in this life, you will worship with them in the next. Pray for them. It's not an easy road for them. Okay? We partner obviously with you. You are a huge part of this partnership. I know Chad is a long ways away, and it's hard for you to even imagine what ministry and life and what the Bagirmi people are all about. But you play a very important role in supporting it financially and prayerfully, encouraging our missionaries, enabling them to do what they're doing. And that is much more than just putting a check in the offering plate. And it's much more than having their card on your fridge. It's thinking about them, praying about them, encouraging them. This is a church home for Nathaniel and Carrie and for Kay. What a huge blessing you are to them. So thank you, Hope. This is a picture from a recent trip I took to Chad in, I guess it was February now, so a little time ago. But this is a group of people from the Pacific region of the Church of the Lutheran Brethren. I occasionally take trips to Chad where I bring a team with me so that people can see the ministry on the ground. And I love doing that because it just creates even more a better connection. In January, I'll be taking a central region trip. So Hope is a part of that region of the Lutheran Brethren. So I hope that I can have at least one person from Hope join us so that you can see that mission on the ground, so that you can see our missionaries on the ground. So if you have more questions about that, let me know. Thank you for partnering. Adoption involves perseverance. Why do we persevere? Well, for one, it's not an easy mission, and it requires perseverance and patience. I just want to tell you a story about this man named Muhammad. He's a friend of mine who, when I first met him, very devout Muslim, memorized the whole Quran, which is like our New Testament, memorized it. Very devout. He started to hear the gospel through our friendship because we became close friends very quickly. He became a believer and was baptized. But it's been a very hard road for him. Very hard road. Trying to determine what does it mean to live as a follower of Jesus in a context where all my family and all my contacts and all my community are Muslim, and if I come out publicly and confess my faith as a Christian, I may lose everything, including my children, including my wife, including maybe my life. So it's been a hard road. So when I was there visiting with him, I was talking to him about this journey he's been on. And he said, don't give up. I know this mission is hard. Don't give up on my people. We happened to be drinking Coca-Colas at the time. And he paused and he said, the gospel in Chad is like Coke. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, it wasn't that long ago when Coke was brand new to Chad. And everybody was skeptical about Coke because it came from someplace foreign. And I was skeptical, and I thought it was probably bad for me, which he's probably right. But he said, it was when a friend of mine that I trusted offered me a Coke and said, you should try this, that I tried it. And he said, now I can't get enough Coke. He said, the gospel of Chad, gospel is like this in Chad. He said, I know the mission is hard, and I know it is met with skepticism, and I know there is a risk and a danger involved, but you must keep the gospel in front of our people. You must keep the gospel in front of the Bagirmi people. There will be skepticism, there will be pushback, there will be oppression, but as we heard in the scriptures today, sometimes there's a time to shake the dust off your feet and move on and find somebody who wants to listen. But there are people who are listening and paying attention, and there are people who are taking a sip, or tasting, and seeing that the Lord is good. There are people who are responding to our message of the gospel and are saying, we want to hear more. And we must not shrink back from this mission. I believe we are on the cusp of something amazing. I'm anticipating great things from God as we are faithful. But we must continue to be faithful. And I think we will see amazing things. This is basically the last frontier of missions. So that's why we persevere. Pray for people like the new Bagirmi believers. Pray for people like Muhammad. Adoption involves supporting. What are we supporting? We're supporting a lot of different things. And I'm just going to talk about a few of them. But as you support this mission, it's much more than just paying the salary of Nathaniel and Carrie Zabodi, for example, or Kay Ashe. You're supporting a wide range of ministry activities that serve as a bridge to bring the gospel into the ears of people who haven't heard it before, because faith comes through hearing. All right? It even goes down to things like supporting a vehicle for our missionaries to be able to get around. Nathaniel and Carrie live in a place where in the 3-month rainy season, which is actually right now, you can't even get out by car. Even when you have a Land Cruiser, you can't get out. The roads are so bad. And so we're pursuing now on putting in an airstrip. Maybe some of you know this. We're putting in an airstrip in Budamasa. It's just a simple airstrip that a little prop Cessna 240 plane can land in, a 6-passenger plane. So it's just a level area that's cleared of brush and trees and packed down. But we're putting that in so that our missionaries can get out when they need to. That even stuff like that you're supporting. Before I talk about this school, some of you have probably seen this. I noticed you have one out on the coffee table. This is Nathaniel has been doing a lot of scripture translation. He's involved in a process that will hopefully see the entire scriptures translated into Bagirmi. I mentioned they've already done Mark. They've done other scripture portions. This is a book, if you haven't heard, about Genesis. This is the first 3 chapters of Genesis in the Bagirmi language. We have it in Roman script, or the ABC kind of script. We also have it in Arabic script. Illustrated by Sarah Ronovic, who's a professional artist in Fergus Falls. And this is a very exciting thing, and it's been very well received. A lot of the Bagirmi people are illiterate people. They can't read. So it's really helpful to have pictures along with the text to tell the story. Nathaniel and Carrie are also involved in teaching people how to read so they can read their scriptures. Anyway, I wanted to promote this because this is a a big project. It's also obviously not cheap to produce this. I have a bunch in the back. We've printed over 100 of them. Some of them will be going to Chad. Some of them we want to make available to you so you can have a copy. But what we're asking for is a $50 donation for the book, and then the proceeds go back directly into this ongoing translation work. If any of you are interested in that, let me know, because I have a bunch in the back. Let me talk about this. This is exciting. Next up, a Christian school among the Bagirmi. In a little bit, you're going to hear a video from Nathaniel talking about this. But the Bagirmi chief in Budamasa has actually asked Nathaniel if he would consider starting a school in Budamasa for kids to learn. One of the biggest felt needs that I hear from Bagirmi chiefs when I go and visit villages that we put wells in or whatever is education for their children. The public school system is bad, and they're looking for opportunities to teach their kids. And by the way, they're saying, and if it's a mission school that teaches the Bible, that's just fine. So they're inviting us to do this. And so we've been talking about it. We've been praying about it. We've hired a Chadian Christian teacher who will be moving to Budamasa shortly, and we will be starting a school this fall. Huge potential for introducing the gospel to children who will grow up then with it. And God will have all that time to work on their hearts. So this is very exciting. So if we could cue that video.
In Budamasa, only for about 3 years now. Small Bagirmi town in the middle of the ancient Bagirmi kingdom. And our primary purpose here is evangelism. We came here to bring the gospel to people who haven't heard it, quite simply. How do we do that? No one told us. They just sent us here and said, figure it out. And that's great, because we have the Holy Spirit, and he guides us from day to day. I have purposefully avoided any activity that didn't seem to directly lend itself to gospel proclamation. And for that reason, I've avoided some sorts of projects, development projects. I resisted the idea of a school because I saw it as something that would just eat all my time working in education, and wouldn't be able to get to the work of an evangelist. The longer we're here, which hasn't been all that long yet, the more we realize how many different aspects of life contribute to the work of evangelism. We make friendships. We work in a community with other people, whether it's gardening or just visiting them in their fields. We're working in literacy. We've published a book of Bagirmi fables that the old guys tell me, and I record and we write it down. And we're publishing Christian biblical material now as well. Out of necessity, I've kind of become a Bible translator because we need a basis of translated scripture for evangelism. We're publishing an illustrated story Bible, which is really exciting with the original artwork. I'm involved in agricultural development as we teach people some sustainable gardening techniques. We have a few people that live right next door and settled down because they want to learn how to read. And I was the guy around here who could teach them how to read and study the Bible, new believers, in fact. And the more we thought about it, we realized, you know what, we're involved in so many different things, in different aspects of people's lives here. How could we integrate these different elements? Literacy, development, community living, community work. And what we're thinking about, we realized, you know what, there's nothing like a school for integrating the various aspects of what we're doing here, because essentially what we're bringing is knowledge unto salvation, but also knowledge that takes you to the knowledge unto salvation, like how to read. Chad is one of the most impacted countries in the world by climate change. It's a crisis looming on the horizon, and people need to change their agricultural practices pretty quick, and more plows and fertilizer isn't going to do it. We are passionate about gardening and about educating people in a holistic manner of life. And so it seems the Spirit is prodding us towards maybe starting a school, and that seems a little bit overwhelming. But we'd love for you to pray with us about that. Imagine if you teach even a handful of kids, 20 kids, 50 kids, and you call a parent-teacher conference, and share with them what the kids are learning about. Share with them some Bible stories. Let's say we want to run a health clinic for the women in the village and basic care of newborn infants. Well, how easy would that be if you call a meeting at the school for the women in town? Let's say we want to show the Viges film, and we go to the chief in the village and say, Jesus' film is being projected at the school tomorrow. You have people show up. It would be a nexus for community outreach, all in service of the gospel. I look back through history, I think of the ancient early church schools of Antioch and Jerusalem and Alexandria, or I think of the monasteries throughout the Middle Ages, or I think of the school in Wittenberg and the Reformation, or Port Royal in France, and the first universities in America of Cambridge and Oxford, and how these places are ferments for culture and ferments for development of mentality. And I just see a direct link between that and the gospel. Why not have a university in Budamasa as the little children grow into it? Why not have a center of agricultural development, cutting edge, sustainable techniques for the African continent sometime in the future? Well, they say think globally, act locally. Sustainable change happens slowly by nature. So, pray with us. Maybe next year we'll start a first grade or something. Who knows?
And that was taken in December, and plans have moved forward, and we are indeed starting a school. There's a lot involved in starting a school, a lot of uncertainties and a lot of unknowns, so you can continue to pray, please. We need to support the school. That's just one other thing that you could be involved in as a church, is supporting the school. One of the ideas Nathaniel and I have been throwing around is how to sustainably support it in a way that the community is involved. Just for example, one thing we're thinking about is having a herd of cattle owned by the school, but donors could contribute to buy a cow, for example. That herd of cattle then would be taken care of by the community, and it would be an income-generating activity for the school. We've talked about an orchard, planting an orchard that the children would be involved with taking care of, or a garden. We've talked about different things. But all of these things are ways that you can, as a church, learn about and engage with. So we support Living Waters. You guys are familiar with this because you as a church have supported this ministry. This is a ministry where we meet a real physical need in Chad in the provision of a well that will provide abundant clean water to a thirsty community, and to meet a spiritual need. These wells are going into communities that do not have access to the gospel. And we are able, through these wells, to create a bridge by which we can share the gospel with people who haven't heard it before. And it's an ongoing, it's not just about slapping in the well and leaving. When we put in a well in a village, we make a commitment as a mission to continue to visit that village for the sake of the gospel and to develop relationships. Some relationships really go well, and we do a lot more. We might do mosquito net distribution, or we might do agricultural development, or maybe sometime down the road a school, I don't know. Other villages, the connection isn't as great, but that's our intention. Very quickly, because I know it's 11, but I'll finish up quickly here. This is why we do wells. Access to safe drinking water in Chad is among the lowest in the world, 51%. Diseases like cholera, typhoid, hepatitis A caused by contaminated water is in the top 3 leading causes of death in Chad, particularly among infants because of unclean water. Women and children in Chad walk an average of 3.7 miles a day just to fetch water. And they're not doing it with fancy equipment to haul it in. They're hauling it in buckets on their heads. Okay, 8 out of 10 Chadians who don't have access to clean water live in rural areas. And we are intentionally going into those rural areas, into the most isolated communities, and putting in wells. This is Del Salsar. This is a well that went in last year thanks to donations from Hope. We support other ministries too. This is actually one that is affecting Nathaniel and Carrie quite closely. There are these Wadabe refugees that are coming from Central African Republic. Central African Republic is a country to the southeast of Chad. It's been kind of a horrible history of decline in the past decade, and it's anarchy basically, and there's just no law, and so there are these roving militia groups that are going around terrorizing people, killing people, stealing people, and so the Wodaabe are nomadic people who have cattle who have been victims, and their cattle have been stolen. Their men who have defended their cattle have been killed, and so a lot of them widows and orphans, and some men have fled into Chad, and a lot of them are settling in the area where we're doing ministry, including a group that just settled right next door to Nathaniel and Carrie's house. That picture of Amin baptizing somebody, he was a Wodaabe young man. All right? So many are transitioning into life right alongside the Bagirmi people, including one settlement in Nathaniel and Carrie's neighborhood. They're just setting up shop. This is not your typical refugee camps with blue tarps and fences and anything. These are people that are just squatting. Nobody else is helping them. They've fled with all that they can carry on their backs, and they're setting up houses made of straw and trying to transition to a new life. And God has brought them into our path. So we are helping them. We are helping them in many ways. First of all, just a transition to life. We're distributing grain to them, which also come from donations from people like you. We're distributing blankets and tarps, mosquito nets, and wells. This all obviously doesn't come easy, it doesn't come free, but it's a powerful tool for the gospel. And we are literally saving lives in the physical sense in a dramatic way. And that also is the calling of God for us to love our neighbor. Okay? So we're doing that. So you guys are involved with that. If you want to know more about that, please talk to me. Thank you, Hope. Lots of different ways we can support this ministry. Bagirmi Storying Project, very briefly, Nathaniel is involved now. In December it will happen, where he will be bringing together Bagirmi storytellers, traditional storytellers. They will be trained in how to tell Bible stories in a way that is appropriate and acceptable to the Bagirmi culture, but accurate to the Bible. And they will be recorded and then distributed on micromedia. Like everybody has phones now in Chad, so you can just insert a chip into your phone and you can hear the Bible through these storying projects in an animated way. We're working on that project. That's exciting. Small business development, Bagirmi literacy projects, gardening, agricultural development, missionary outfitting. Kay needs to be outfitted for her service in Chad. We'll be building a house for her, getting a vehicle for her. All those things need to be supported. Chadian missionary training, general support. This is a picture of a peanut sheller machine. It's a microfinance project that one of our donors has been involved with to help people start small businesses through a microfinance loan, which is paid back interest-free. But we help them to develop a plan to start a new business. And through that, we make relationships and friendships, and we share the gospel. So I love this work. Adoption involves reward. What is the reward? Obviously, the reward, as I mentioned, is that you are a part of something big that God is doing to see the gospel go forth among people who haven't heard it, so that not all of them will receive it, not all of them will accept it, but we believe that there will be many that will. And the reward is that we get to worship with them in heaven one day. And that's plenty reward. It says in the Bible that even when one person comes to faith, or like, when the good shepherd leaves the 99 to go search the one that's lost, talks about the woman who's looking for one coin in her house, and she sweeps her whole house and finally finds it. The rejoicing that happens when even one person comes to faith. And when God gets to use you to see that happen, and all of heaven rejoices when somebody comes to faith. What a privilege to be part of that. So again, Hope, I just want to say thank you for adopting the Bagirmi people, and thank you for persevering, for supporting, for being part of this team. Amen.